The topic for the day is with respect to current affairs related to the arena of economics and current development. I understand that this is very important when in our country we read about PM Cares Fund, which is all devoted to money, and when we read about in Indian context with respect to RBI giving help to the government, or when we hear about that a particular country, Saudi Arabia, asking a particular money back from Pakistan, or take an example about the RBI coming in news with respect to its policy with respect to its policy decision and its impact on all of us. And then we're hearing this term such as inflation. Then we are hearing this particular term repo rate, reverse repo rate, all and all. And there's much more. And to know what is this much more, over to you, sir.
Yeah, hi. So for today's lecture, what I want to do is that I've been reading economics myself a lot, right? And there are a lot of pieces of news articles, etc., that I think have become really important. Now, like all lectures, because we take once a week lecture, right, it's impossible for me to do a daily current affairs sort of session with you. So what I want to do today, just like every other lecture, is probably focus on some important, let's say, topics and some important developments that have happened in the world of economics. And what I will also like to do on the side is I'll try to explain to you some basic phenomena pertaining to economics as and when they are related to the particular topic, right? So I understand economics can become technical sometimes, right? Because a lot of you might have taken economics in class 12. Like I myself, when I wrote CLAT, I didn't have economics, but that time these questions also didn't come in CLAT. But so this session is going to be very easy for someone who has a background in economics, who's done economics in 11th and 12th. And for people who haven't done economics, there might be certain terms here that you might not be able to understand. So I've kept open my Zoom link. Okay. So if there is anything that you want to ask, if there's any comment that you want to make, if there's any doubt, right? Because there will obviously be some technical terms you can ask here, but don't worry about that as well. I think Harsh and I just spoke today. We will also take a session tomorrow, I think same time, and we'll talk about certain basic concepts and phenomena in economics, right? Because that will then help you to understand what we discussed today, and it'll also help you vis-a-vis when you are understanding the articles, etc., when you read newspapers, etc., pertaining to economics, right? So let me just try to share the screen and then let's look at the current affairs in economics. Second. One second. Yeah, is this screen share visible to everyone? Harsh, is it visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. One second. Okay, sure. So let's one sec. Okay, so Ashish and Arushi, you can ask your questions here. I'll keep open the group chat because there are bound to be certain questions that and certain concepts which might not be clear to everyone. Okay, so let's just start broadly with the things that have happened in the last 1 year. I have basically covered everything that can come in the form of a paragraph, right? So obviously there could be questions which come in the form of, let's say, who is the chairman of this committee, or let's say there's a question which says the president of the chief of this body is whom, right? So obviously I can't tell you all of those things. Those static current affairs you can obviously gather when you read the newspapers, but I've tried to cover each and everything that might come in the form of paragraphs which deal with a couple of concepts at least per topic. Okay, so having said that, let's just begin. So the first thing that I want to discuss is the imminent slowdown in the Indian economy, right? So unless and until you've been living under a rock, you know that the Indian economy has been gearing towards a slowdown, right? Things are not as good as we would want them to be. Obviously, there are certain issues as to why the Indian economy is suffering. The primary reason is that we have obviously in the past, let's say 4 or 5 years, taken some economic decisions which have not fared well for the country at large. And obviously, then all of that was exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic that we are facing right now. Okay, so some statistics have been released. The first is that the GDP growth rate for the third quarter, okay, is 4.7%, which is the lowest GDP growth rate we've seen in the last 7 years. Okay. Now, this is released by this body called NSO, National Statistics Organization. Now, recently, NSO was a body that was formed after merging two other bodies that were associated with the work of conducting, let's say, surveys and coming up with statistics in our country. This is the CSO, Central Statistics Organization, and NSSO. Okay, so all of them were merged and they formed a body, the new body called the NSO, which falls under the Ministry of Statistics and under the MOSPI, right? One second. So MOSPI stands for Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Okay, you can jot that down, or you can obviously read about it later. So until now, the world had been looking at India as the fastest growing economy, but that has changed, right? We've also seen how China has now sort of, let's say, recovered from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. So if you've been following the news, yesterday, I think there was a large DJ/pool party in Wuhan. So these guys are now throwing pool parties, and the entire world is basically suffering from corona, and India has not even hit the peak of the coronavirus yet, right? So India was supposed to be Ashish. Okay, I'll just check the establishing date, Ashish. I will try to include it, or you can probably Google it. My idea here is to give you the concepts, right? And if you understand these things at large, then you can obviously jot down these statistical points, because I'm assuming you're reading the newspapers anyways. Okay. Anyways, continuing. So obviously now China has registered a 6.5% growth rate in the same quarter. Therefore, we have lagged behind China. Okay. Now, there are certain other factors which were pointed out by this GDP growth rate report that came out with NSO. The first is that fixed investment rate has been declining sharply since 2011-12, and then it had plateaued around 2016, which meant that there was a deceleration in growth since 2017 and 18. Okay, so the issue with fixed investment rate is, those of you who have studied economics would know that investment as a concept in economics is studied a little bit differently from the general concept of investment that we see in that we understand in regular parlance, right? So investment in economics means that you're creating assets, you're creating capital, right? So obviously fixed investments have been declining. Therefore, that means that the companies and people are expecting a slowdown, and they're not investing in assets to, let's say, boost production. Once that happens, then obviously GDP will not increase much faster. Okay. Now, the second point that was relatively relevantly pointed out was that there has been a decline in the savings in the economy, right? So in 2011, the percentage of savings was 32.7%, but now in the last year, which is 2018, it has declined to 29.3%. Okay. Now, the reason why the savings has declined is because there is a declining wage growth. So let's say inflation is on the rise, GDP, and let's say all the factors being consistent, if the wages do not grow at the rate that inflation or other factors are growing, therefore, obviously, let's say I earn 100 rupees today, okay, and everything that I need in the market comes for 90 bucks. So I can then save 10 rupees, right? But let's say inflation increases by 10% and my wages only grow by 5%. So now everything that I need to purchase from the market comes the next year for 95 rupees. Okay. However, my salary has is raising at 10%, right? So it comes at for 99 rupees, and my salary or my wages have only increased by 5%. So the salary that I get now is 105 rupees. So therefore, last time when I was saving 10 bucks, this time I'm not able to save those 10 bucks, and I'm only saving those 5-6 rupees, right? And that is the problem that our economy is seeing, that the real wage growth rate has been declining. Okay. Now, there's a council known as the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Okay, one of the members in that advisory council had said that India is looking at something known as a middle income trap. Okay, so middle income trap is basically a phenomena that was pointed out by the World Bank in its 2007 report. So let me try to explain to you what the middle income trap is. Okay. So the concept of the middle income trap is, let's say there is an economy like India where initially the wages were low. Okay. So because the wages were low, companies could pay the employees less money, which would mean that the cost of production of any one particular good, let's say a pen, would be lower. And then because the cost of production is lower, then we could export it to other developed countries, and because our goods would be cheaper, therefore the demand for our goods would increase and we would benefit out of it, right? But over the years, because the economy has also seen a little progress, the wages in India have also increased, okay? Or any, so let's say if the wages now increase, it means that the same product will cost a little more, because now the factory owner will have to pay a little more wage or a little more salary to the producer, right? Now, as this happens, our goods in the international market start losing their competitiveness, right? So if the goods become expensive, then obviously people will buy less of them, and they could shift to other cheaper products, right? So now the middle income trap is when this has happened, wages have increased, however the economy has not been able to progress, right? So let's say India till this day continues to do very basic manufacturing, right? We don't indulge in high end manufacturing. Let's say if you look at the example of Germany basically also is a very strong manufacturing economy, but it manufactures very high value products, right? So it manufactures machines, let's say, which are then used to manufacture shoes in India, right? So obviously the machine is a high-end product, and obviously more money and more expertise is required therein, and greater value is generated, right? And the machine is then used by workers in India or Bangladesh to make shoes. Now obviously less of an input is required in making shoes, and therefore the value added is lower. So in the context of the Indian economy, what the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council is saying, that we can, because of this particular reason, fall in the middle income trap, because our wages will increase, so our cheap goods will become expensive. However, at the same time, we have not invested enough in high-end products. Therefore, we will not be able to compete in the high-end products in the already developed countries. So we'll be left in the middle. We will either not be very poor, but we will also not be able to become very rich. So currently, a country in the world that is facing the middle income trap, an example is Brazil. Okay, so it's predicted that India might also be going down that path unless and until proper economic measures are taken by the government. Okay. Now, the second topic that I would like to discuss with you is the, one second. Yeah, so second topic is the 15th Finance Commission. Okay, one second. So exporting does not help the country to increase economy. So exporting obviously does help the country to increase the economy, but the issue is that, as I told you, right? Let's say I export something for 10 rupees. Now the reason why it is being able to, the reason why the factory is able to export it for 10 rupees is because it is giving me 1 rupee. So as and when economy grows, obviously then my expectation for salary also increases, and let's say my salary now, let's say, becomes 2 rupees. So now the company will have to sell the same good at 11 rupees. Now the moment the company starts selling that particular product for 11 rupees, somebody sitting outside in the world will say, no, I don't want to buy something for 11 rupees, because let's say a Bangladesh or a South Africa is selling the same thing to me for 10.5 rupees. So that's how the countries fall into this middle income trap, right? Because your wages are increasing and I'm only manufacturing shoes. I am not able to manufacture, let's say, computers or any high-end product as such, where I could have that sort of a value addition. So this is that I'm talking about. Ashish, I hope that's a little clear to you now. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the 15th Finance Commission. So under Article 280 of the Constitution, it is stated that the President forms the Finance Commission every 5 years. Okay. Now, what the job of the Finance Commission is very simple. Okay. So in India, states collect their own taxes, and the states also collect a lot of taxes that are described as central taxes which accrue to the center, right? Now, obviously, the center does not need all of the central taxes that accrues to the center. Therefore, every 5 years, the Finance Commission is set up at the behest of the President, and the job of the Finance Commission is to basically lay down a plan as to how the central taxes would be equitably distributed to the states. Okay, so the 15th Finance Commission has now been proposed. Okay, so under the 14th Finance Commission, so the center used to keep 58% of the taxes that it collected, and the remaining 42% used to be given down to the states. Now, under the 15th Finance Commission, the state is going to keep 59% of the tax, and the states will only get 1% of the tax. This is because 1% of the tax will now be sent to the union territories of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, right? Earlier, they used to be classified as states. So obviously the state taxes, so the devolution would be given to them directly. However, now because they have become union territories after removal of Article 370, they come under the direct ambit of the center. Okay. So let's look at the formula that the 15th Finance Commission has used and how this is different from the 14th Finance Commission. Okay. So the first principle or the criteria that they use for devolution basically means redistributing a tax to the state, is the first concept is of income distance. Okay. So in the 14th FC, the income distance was 50, and in the 15th FC, the income distance was 45. So income distance basically means let's say there is one state which has the maximum amount of, let's say, taxes that the state pays. So you will take that state's income as one, right? And let's say then there is a state which pays, let's say, 70% of taxes of that state, then you will give a value of 0.7 to that particular state, and based on that, based on the distance from the state that makes the maximum money, you will redistribute income, right? So let's say there is a state that makes 100 rupees in taxes, okay, and there's another state that makes only 10 rupees in taxes. Now obviously it is the center's responsibility to make sure that the state which is making 10 rupees in taxes should be helped a little more. So that is the concept of income distance. Okay. Now then, as per the 14th Finance Commission, 17.5% or 17.5% value was given to the population of 1971. However, the 15th Finance Commission completely ignores the 1971 population. In the 14th FC, 2011 population was given 10% weightage, and the 15th Finance Commission gives a 15% weightage to this population. Now, this issue vis-a-vis 14th and 15th Finance Commission, when there is not enough importance given to the population in 1971 and more importance is given to population in 2011, has caused some states to register a protest. Right? For example, there are certain states like Tamil Nadu, etc., which have done a great job in making sure that India does not go through a population explosion. So these states have put in a lot of effort. They have educated their people. They have distributed contraceptives. They have done everything that is possible in their path to make sure that the fertility rate comes down and the number of people in the rate of increase of number of people in the state comes down, right? So obviously these states have put in some efforts. Now these states are saying that if you then look at a state like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, which has obviously not done as well as a state like Tamil Nadu, so obviously it's sort of a punishment to the states that have done well to control population, right? Otherwise, if they had not done well to control population, then their share of taxes that they receive would continue to increase. So this is an area that is becoming problematic for these states. Again, this is the issue that some states are raising, that why have you given more emphasis to the population in 2011 and why not to the population in 1971? Okay. Now, the fourth parameter that they have used is area. So it remains the same. Obviously, the larger the area of your state, the more money you obviously need, right? So 15% of weightage is given in both. Then in the 14th Finance Commission, the forest cover was given a 7.5% weightage. However, in the 15th Finance Commission, there is no weightage given to forest cover. Instead, they have created a new category called forest and ecology, right? So based on the policies that the states are following for their forest and based on their ecological policies, they are getting a 10% weightage in terms of devolution of taxes. Okay. Then there is another important concept known as demographic performance, right? So in the 14th Finance Commission, demographic performance was absent. They have introduced it in the 15th Finance Commission. So demographic performance basically means total fertility rate, right? So the total fertility rate is basically the number of children an adult woman will have in her lifetime. Okay. So some states in India, so obviously, let's say, you would have heard this principle, right? Hum do, hamare do. So if every lady is producing only 2 children in her lifetime, then obviously the population will not increase. However, there is of 10%. So they give a weightage of 0.1 to people who, let's say, to children who don't survive, or children who or people who die early than their, let's say, late 60s or 70s, right? So let's say the replacement ratio that India wants is 2.1. So if every adult female produces 2.1 kids in her lifetime, then India will have a stable population. So there are some states which have a total fertility rate of 1.8, 1.9, which means that the states have done a good job to fight population explosion. But on the other hand, there still continue to be some states which have a fertility rate of 4, 5, and 6, right? Which means that these states are going for a population explosion. So if some states have put in enough efforts, if they have reduced their total fertility rates, then 12.5% weightage is given to them. Similarly, a new concept known as tax effort has been introduced. Tax effort basically means the ratio of total taxes actually collected to the taxes that could have been collected. It's a ratio of total taxes to the estimate of taxes, right? So obviously this policy is there to reward states to make sure that their tax collection mechanism is better, right? Because obviously the entire point of this exercise is to give back the taxes to the center. So if a state is producing and giving more tax to the center in terms of, let's say, better administrative policies, etc., which are leading to a higher collection of tax, then that state obviously deserves to be rewarded. Okay. So this is the primary idea behind so this is the differentiating factor between the 14th and the 15th Finance Commission. It has been in the news a lot because a lot of South Indian states have been expressing a grouse, and they're saying that a lot of North Indian states like Jharkhand, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are holding us down, and we are being punished for performing exceedingly well on the social parameters that were given to us by the government in the late 70s and early 80s. Okay. Now, under the 15th Finance Commission, there is more devolution to local bodies as compared to the 14th Finance Commission. Okay, so under the 14th Finance Commission, they just used to give money to the states, and then they said it's up to you. You form their state finance commission, and then you decide how money is to be given to local bodies. But the 15th Finance Commission gives certain specific guidelines as to how money is to be distributed to the local bodies, right? Because obviously the State Finance Commission wasn't doing a good enough job of giving money to the municipal corporations and the panchayats. Okay. So the next topic that I want to discuss is GST. Now, I'm not going to discuss GST in detail in the sense what exactly GST is. GST has been around since 2017. It's been 3 years. Now, I'm assuming that you guys know a little about GST. If you don't, you can ask me in the doubt session, or you can message Harsh. Probably in tomorrow's class or some other class, I'll go when I talk about basic concepts in economics. Maybe I'll try to explain what GST is to you. But right now, I'm going to focus on what has been in the news vis-a-vis GST. Okay, so there have been two things. The first thing is, if you've been following the news, you realize that there is a certain tension between states and the center. So the states have been saying that they've been asking the center to give them money that is due to them under the GST because they need the money to fight the pandemic. But the center is saying that because of the pandemic and because of, let's say, maybe certain policies of the center, there has been a lower GST collection as opposed to what they had expected. Now, obviously, if there is a lower GST collection, there would be losses that accrue to the state, right? So the center has now said that there was a cess, which was known as the compensation cess. That the idea of the compensation cess was that the extra tax was levied on luxury and sin goods like alcohol and cigarettes, etc., to make sure that if there are any losses to the states because of the GST, this compensation cess would be used to make sure that the states get their own due, right? So the reason why there could be losses to the states is because before GST, there used to be source-based taxes, right? Like your excise duty, VAT, etc. But GST is a destination-based tax. So GST is levied when the final sale occurs at a destination which is different from which most likely is different from the destination where the good was produced. And therefore, some states believe that we could obviously suffer a, let's say, shortfall in revenue. So the center said that for 5 years, that is till 2022, we will protect you against all of these losses, and basically the money that will be required to fulfill this shortcoming, to fulfill this shortfall, would be the money that would come from this compensation cess that I'm talking about. One second. Okay. Now, another thing that has happened vis-a-vis GST is that the government has talked about this Sabka Vishwas scheme. Okay. So as I told you, GST is something which subsumes your service tax and central excise taxes. So now the central government is saying that there is no point in me and in the government fighting these service tax and central excise tax cases, which are pending in multiple tribunals, etc. So the center is saying that so I am going to come up with a Sabka Vishwas scheme, which means that I am willing to, let's say, do away with all these disputes. So either you give me the money that is due to me. Okay, 1 second. Okay, or they're saying that if there are proceedings pending against you against the service tax and central excise taxes, if there is an investigation, we also don't want to waste money. So what you do is you tell us how much money you owe to us. We will not charge you with any criminal case, and this is the angle of amnesty that is being provided here. So the state is saying bahut ho gaya, send service tax, central excise tax, ye sab khatam karo, we don't need it, so we want to do away with the tribunal also. So therefore the center is coming up with this sabka vishwas scheme, wherein they're saying please disclose whatever tax you have to pay to us. If you tell us whatever tax you have to pay, if you tell us how much tax you've hidden from us, it's okay, we will not initiate any criminal complaints against you. Okay. Then if you've been following the news, RBI has also been in the news, and the single most important thing that happened is that RBI transferred 1.76 lakh crore rupees to the union government. Okay. Now there is a section in the RBI Act known as Section 47, which talks about allocation of surplus profits of the RBI, right? So 1.76 lakh crore rupees that was given by the RBI to the central government created a lot of political storms. People were saying that the government is pressurizing. As the Sabka Vishwas scheme has been launched, it's a legacy scheme. It's an ongoing scheme. It's basically saying that any disputes that are already also, it's a retrospective scheme. It's not for schemes. It's not for disputes that will occur from today, right? It's a retrospective scheme because now the disputes won't go to a service tax tribunal because service tax and your other tax, other central, other VAT, etc. have been removed, right? So these taxes don't exist anymore. So it's only a retrospective application. Okay. Now coming back to RBI. Okay, so a lot of people have been saying, and there's a political storm that the government has pressurized the RBI to give this much money to them. However, what you have to understand is that before this, what RBI used to do is that they used to put in a lot of the profit and the surplus that they make in their contingency fund and for developing assets of their own, right? However, it's not that this government has been pressurizing RBI. In 2013, there was a committee known as the Malegaon Committee, which recommended that the RBI really does not need to keep so much money with itself for contingency purposes. Right. So there was a committee in 2013. Then similarly, there was another committee recently known as the Bimal Jalan Committee. I think it's 2016, but this is the most recent committee. You should check up upon it. So the Bimal Jalan Committee itself told RBI that, listen, you guys really don't need to keep so much money. You can give this money to the central government because the central government can then use this much money better. It can put it for education. It can put it for healthcare. It can use it for defense or any other purpose, right? So the recommendation came directly from the Bimal Jalan Committee. So this Bimal Jalan Committee becomes important. And once the Bimal Jalan Committee and the Malegaon Committee both said that, listen, RBI, you really don't need this much money with yourself. Therefore, the amount of money that the RBI has been giving the states, has been giving the central government has increased. I think day before yesterday, I forgot to mention here, RBI again has given some 55-60,000 crores to the central government under the Section 47 of the RBI Act itself. Okay, so basically why I want to discuss this is that you have to know the names of these two important committees, Malegaon Committee and the Bimal Jalan Committee. Okay. Now another thing that I think is very important is digital payments, right? Because digital payments is something that a lot of you might have already used by now. You have, I think, given $100 to Harsh for this course, right? So most of you would have used some form of digital payment. So digital payments are being a reality, and the government of India and our Prime Minister also keeps on talking about digital India, right? So digital payments is something that I want to discuss. So recently, what the RBI has done is to make sure that there is a flow of money in the economy, to make sure that the things keep on running. It has removed any charges that used to occur via NEFT and RTGS. Okay, so earlier on there were some minor charges that used to occur if you make payments via NEFT and RTGS. So the RBI has said that we are not charging any, we are not, so we are removing the charges for these payments, and these benefits should be directly transferred to the consumers. Now, another very interesting thing that the RBI has done is that it has waived off the merchant discount rate for merchant discount rate charges for RuPay and UPI transactions. Okay, so basically, if let's say if some of your shop owners, you must understand. Let's say I come to your shop and I give you 10,000 rupees in cash. Okay, if I buy a product worth 10,000 rupees in cash, I give you 10,000 rupees in cash. You are happy, I am happy. However, let's say I have a credit card or a debit card, and I say, oh, I don't have cash. I will I want to make a digital payment. Now the issue is that after, let's say, the limit of 10,000 rupees or 8,000 rupees, whatever the limit was, 1 or 2% extra money would be charged, and this was known as the merchant discount rate. So generally the merchants would suffer out of it. Sometimes the merchants would transfer this rate to the consumers, and the consumers would have to pay a little more money, right? So RBI has now said that we are doing away with the merchant discount rate if you make transactions via RuPay cards or UPI payments. Now, obviously, RuPay and UPI are both Indian, and therefore RBI is going for it. These exemptions are not valid for your Visa cards or your what is that other thing, MasterCard payments. It apply only for RuPay and UPI. Okay. Now, another thing that has happened recently is that if you are a company which has an annual turnover of 50 crore rupees, then you have to accept RuPay and UPI as modes of payment. Okay. You can't say no to someone who comes with a RuPay debit card, or someone who says that I will use UPI to transfer money. If your annual turnover is above 50 crore rupees, you obviously have to accept these form of payments. Okay. So RuPay and UPI are the products of the National Payment Corporation of India. Okay. And National Payment Corporation of India is basically an organization that operates retail payments and settlements. That's its mandate. It is formed under the initiative of, obviously, the Reserve Bank of India and the Indian Bankers Association. Okay. And it traces its origin to the Payment and Settlement Systems Act of 2007. Okay. Now a little data about digital payments, because you have to understand how much digital payments are increasing every year, and therefore why digital payments are so important. Okay. So there is a concept known as compounded annual growth rate, which means that year on year, how many percentage terms, in percentage terms, how many times something is seeing a growth. Okay. So in terms of CAGR, digital payments have seen a 61% term in volume and 19% growth rate in terms of value, respectively, over the last 5 years. So every year it's growing by 60% in volume and roughly 20% in value. Okay. Now, again, there are certain committees that become important. So these are two committees that I want to mention, which are important vis-a-vis digital payment infrastructure in India. Now, these committees are the Ratan Vatal Committee of 2016 and the Nandan Nilekani Committee of 2019. Okay, these two committees are important. Another thing that I found in the news recently, which becomes important, is that there is an artificial AI-based chatbot known as Pi. Okay, now Pi is to create awareness about NPCI's products. You have FASTag, RuPay, etc. Right? So this has been developed by this Bangalore-based startup called Corover Private Limited. That's not important. What is important is that there is an artificial intelligence-enabled chatbot known as Pi, and the job of Pi is to basically create awareness about FASTag, RuPay, UPI, etc. All of these are basically NPCI products. Okay. Now I want to talk to you about, one second. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about this concept of Masala Bonds. Okay. So I think some of you, FASTag is for Karya Ashish, that thing only, that FASTag thing. So Pi basically is a chatbot that will spread awareness to people. They will tell people to use FASTag, why FASTag is better. They'll tell people to use UPI, and they'll tell people to go for RuPay debit cards. That's the job of the artificial intelligence based software. So yeah, FASTag is that only. Okay, so let's talk about Masala Bonds. Okay. So see, so do you guys understand what bonds are? So basically, let's say I need some money. Okay. I will issue a bond to you. I will say that, okay, I am giving you this piece of paper. I need 100 rupees. On this bond, I will keep on paying you 10 rupees every year. And at the 5th year, I will give you the 100 rupees back along with the 10 rupees that you have accumulated every year. Okay. So this is how a bond works. Okay. So in the financial market, when certain companies or certain corporations or even the government, sometimes when they want to raise money, they issue bonds. Okay. So it is called a bond because you're legally, so I don't know if it's true, but you're legally bound to pay back that money or to pay back the value that is mentioned on that bond, right? So generally bonds that are issued in India are obviously denominated in rupees. Let's say I want 100 rupees. So when I write down a contract, I say that, okay, I have a bond worth 100 rupees. I will pay you 5 rupees at interest on these bonds, known as coupon payment. Now, if a bond is issued in the United States of America and people in the United States of America want to buy that bond, then obviously that bond is issued in dollars. Okay. Now, what masala bonds are? Masala bonds are basically Indian bonds that are issued by Indian companies. And then the money comes into Indian companies, but the bonds are issued in dollars. Okay. So why this is a little different? Because obviously the customer in the United States of America, let's say that person wants to invest in an Indian company, he doesn't understand rupees, etc. And he doesn't want to be bothered with the exchange rate fluctuation between rupees and dollars, because to him, what he's earning in terms of dollars is the most important factor, right? Because that person is going to spend money in dollars. Similarly, for an Indian, what I'm earning in rupees is the most important to me, right? Because I am going to generally spend that money in terms of rupees itself. So because of this major reason, international transactions into India had been stopped and people were not interested in buying rupee denominated bonds. Now, to target these rich foreign individuals and companies, India has come up with this concept of masala bonds. So these are raised by companies in India, but they're denominated in dollars. Now, the only issue is, let's say I today say that I need 70 rupees from the market. Okay, so I issue a bond worth $1. And I say that I will make a repayment worth five. Like say I'll repay this $1 to you in $3 time. Now let's say in 3 years time, the value of $1 is, so let's say today it's $70. In let's say 3 years, the value of the rupee to a dollar is, let's say, 100 rupees. So what effectively happens is that I have to pay 100 rupees back to that person. Had I issued a rupee denominated bond, I would have only had to pay $70 and whatever little interest on the side, right? So this is why masala bonds are a little problematic also. However, Asian Development Bank has listed a 10-year masala bond, okay, worth about some 850 crore rupees on the global securities market of India exchange, which is known as India INX. Okay, now these bonds are listed in the Luxembourg exchange. So just like we have an exchange in India, like the Bombay Stock Exchange, NSE, and then we also have the India INX. Similarly, there is another exchange in Luxembourg. So these bonds have been issued on two exchanges. They've been listed on two exchanges, in the Luxembourg exchange and in the Indian exchange. Okay. So this is the first time a foreign issuer and a supranational is doing primary listing with India INX, right? So these bonds are issued by ADB, Asian Development, and that's not an Indian company. So this is the first time that a foreign issuer is doing a primary listing with India. Okay. So basically the money that is going to be raised out of these masala bonds is going to be invested in the GIFT IFSC. So GIFT, if you know, is this. So GIFT City is the international financial center that is being propped up in Gujarat. Okay. You can read a little about it. It's not current now. It's been there for a few years now. Therefore, I've not mentioned it here in detail. If you want to know or read a little bit more about it, you can type GIFT City Gujarat. Okay. Now, another thing which has been in the news recently is e-commerce. Okay. Now, why India's e-commerce market is the most attractive market in the world is because we are growing at an annual rate of 51%, which is by far the highest rate of growth that the e-commerce market is seeing in any country, right? So that is the reason why Walmart is coming into India, why Amazon is also coming into India. Every international company wants a pie out of this growing Indian market, right? And so in the market, in the e-commerce space, there are two models of working, right? So first is the market-based model, where let's say the company that is taking money from you only runs a marketplace. It's like a platform, right? Let's say Uber is a marketplace for cabs. Let's say if Uber didn't have its own cabs, I as a normal person could say that I want to put my car on Uber and you can hire that particular car, right? So that is the marketplace model. Then the second model is in the marketplace model, the platform has no share in operating the business. It's only connecting those people and it can take commissions out of it. Okay. Now the second model is the inventory based model. So this is basically what your companies like Flipkart and Amazon also kept on doing. Let's say Amazon sells products from everyone. However, a good 30, 40, 50% of the products that are available on Amazon would be the products that are being produced by Amazon. These are the products that are being sourced by Amazon, and Amazon is earning a lot of money because Amazon is pushing its own products into your portfolio and you keep on buying them, right? So in these two models, 100% FDI is allowed in the marketplace model, obviously, because let's say if there's a marketplace model in India, then a lot of Indian people can list their enterprises and list their products on the marketplace. Therefore, it's beneficial for the average Indian consumer and at the average Indian producer. So 100% FDI is allowed in the automatic route under the marketplace model. However, FDI is not permitted in the inventory based model, right? Because let's say tomorrow some company comes into India and it makes a beautiful e-commerce platform, and then it only continues to sell its own products. So the average Indian producer, average Indian consumer would lose out, and therefore FDI is not allowed. Okay. Now, in February 2019, some important rules for e-commerce came into effect. Let me talk to you about the three major rules. Okay. Now, the first rule is that obviously if an e-commerce firm has a stake in some company, it owns a percentage of the company, then they are not allowed to sell products from that particular company exclusively. Okay. Now, the second thing is no more exclusive deals for selling products on their platform, right? So just say, for example, sometimes there are news that 1+8 only available on Amazon.com, or this iPhone 11 only available on Flipkart. So the government has said now you can't have any more exclusive deals, because what it does is that it's bad for competition, obviously, because if there is only one seller, then that seller can set whatever price they want. Therefore, consumers lose out. And secondly, it forces a lot of producers to then go on with specific deals with these platforms. And they can say that since we are the only seller, the platforms can exploit both the producers and the consumers themselves, right? So the government has said no more exclusive deals. Now, secondly, the government has said that if you're running an e-commerce platform, then no more than 25% of the inventory can be from a single vendor, right? So let's say I open a platform today and I just sell my own products and maybe 10% of the products from other people in the market, then obviously it is going to be a monopolistic platform and I'll not be giving the best terms of interest to those people, right? So therefore the government has said that I can only sell 25% of my own inventory or anyone's inventory, right? So let's say there's a person X, he can only form 25% of the products that I'm selling. For the rest 75% of the other products, I have to go to other people. Okay. Then another thing that the government has said that there will be no more deep discounts, because it distorts the level playing field against brick and mortar shops, right? So brick and mortar shops are your regular shops. They have to pay electricity bills, they have to hire staff, etc. So there are certain expenses that these shops have to incur. However, if you're an online platform, then you only have to hire a warehouse. And as and whenever you need to sell those products, somebody from the warehouse can make sure deliver those products. Right? So obviously the cost of delivery and the cost of holding those goods is much cheaper for you. So because it's a populistic measure, because obviously people who own brick and mortar shops, they were not comfortable with the idea that Amazon was giving 70% discount, 80% discount, because quite frankly, these people could not afford those sort of discounts, right? So this change has been brought in with regards to the e-commerce policy. Then another thing that's been in the news very recently is this idea of elephant bonds, right? So I'm assuming you understand a little about what bonds are, okay? So there was a high-level advisory group headed by this economist called Surjit Balaji. Okay, so this name is very important because so these two names are important: elephant bonds and Surjit Balaji. So he suggested that the government should issue elephant bonds. Okay, so the idea of an elephant bond is very simple. What they're saying is that it is not a mystery that people in India have hidden black money abroad. And whatever said and done, after demonetization, not a lot of that black money actually came to India, right? So the government is now looking at other strategies. So one of the strategies is that Surjit Bhalai said that you give this angle of amnesty to people who have hidden their black money, right? So if people today come and say that I'm sorry, I have 100 crores hidden abroad under the elephant bonds, I will be given complete immunity if I invest 50 crore of that money into a 25-year sovereign bond, right? So the lock-in period for my 50 crore investment would then be 25 years. So for 25 years, my 50 crores would be locked in a bond. Now, obviously, I will get some interest payment out of that bond. It's not a waste investment. And 25 years later, I will get my money back, and I'll also get the interest that I'm earning in over 25 years. And the rest of the 50 crore rupees, I can keep and do whatever I want to do. So sovereign bond means that a bond that is issued by the central government. So let's say I'm a company, right? So let's say I'm Amazon, or let's say I'm Haldiram, and I issue a bond in the market, and I say that, okay, on a 100 rupee bond, I will give you 10 rupees every year. So that's a bond that I am putting out myself, right? But I'm a company, I'm Haldiram, I can go bankrupt tomorrow, and then I might not be able to pay you back the money. So sovereign bond basically means that the government of India is saying that, boss, I need 100 rupees, here, take a bond. Now I will not give you 10 bucks, I will give you 5 rupees. Now, why would people subscribe to a sovereign bond? Because Haldiram can default at any point of time. Government of India is never going to default, right? Because imagine the situation. If government of India is defaulting on a bond payment, if government of India doesn't have money, then honestly, like, your return from a bond that you had purchased from government of India is the last thing that you have to worry about. Okay, for financial markets, the country itself would collapse. So the bond that is issued by the government of the country is known as a sovereign bond. I hope that's clear to you, Ashish. Okay. So similarly, elephant bond is a 25-year sovereign bond. So now why the government has come up with sovereign bond is because it does two things. First, black money comes to India. The second is that if you look at India, there are certain sectors like the infrastructure sector where investments take a long time. So this idea is known as gestation period, right? So let's say I have to put in money to build a shopping mall. Like a shopping mall can be built in 2 years, and then I can give a loan to that company who's making a shopping mall. They can start a shopping mall in 2 years, and they'll start earning money out of it, and they'll start repaying that money to me, right? However, let's say I want to construct a 1,000-kilometer long highway, or I want to construct 5 new railway lines. Now, obviously, a 1,000-kilometer highway will not be constructed in 2 years. It will take 10, 15 years, right? So therefore, we need certain investment in projects like this, so that long investment, like 15, 20-year investment, wherein repayment periods for these bonds or for these loans will start later. So they'll start 10 years down the line, 12 years down the line. So that's one of the primary reasons that the infrastructure sector in India is facing a lot of NPA problems, right? So let's say I took money from ICICI Bank, and I said that I will start repayment in 5 years. But my project initially I thought will start in 5 years, but I probably didn't get permissions, or maybe there were protests, maybe there were riots or something, and then my project is going to get delayed by 5 years. Now ICICI Bank is not going to wait, right? It'll say, I want my money back, I want my interest back. And where will I pay the interest from? The road that I wanted to create has not been created, so I am not earning any money out of it, right? Therefore, I will say, I'm sorry, I am bankrupt, your money is gone. So the government wants to handle this problem because banks can only give short-term loans, right? Because the thing is, banks can give you loans, but the banks also have to make payments to deposit holders. Let's say I put in 100 rupees in ICICI Bank. Tomorrow I'll say, okay, give me 105 rupees because 5% and annual interest you're giving. So the banks also have to make sure that they have enough money in hand to keep paying their depositors. So therefore, there's a mismatch between the assets that the bank has in terms of, let's say, 15, 20-year investment in roads and the liabilities that have, when Abhinav Singh Negi can randomly come at any point of time and say, please give me all my money back. So that's the problem with banking finance. However, if there's a person who has locked in the money for 25 years, that money is not going anywhere. And that money can then very easily be used to invest in, let's say, infrastructure products like building dams, building maybe a nuclear power reactor, these things which take time. So the money from these sovereign bonds, etc., which has a 25-year lock-in period, can be used for that. Okay. Then do we have time? Okay, let's discuss one last topic. So this topic that I want to discuss is the multidimensional poverty index, right? So I hope I don't have to explain to you what poverty is. Poverty karibi hota hai. However, what generally happens is that in India, you have a very objective and a very, let's say, on paper statistical sort of a way to measure poverty, right? You say that if you earn less than 25, 30 rupees a day, then you are poor, right? But somebody who is earning 22 rupees is also poor. Somebody who's earning 2 rupees is also classified as poor. Now, obviously, there is a world of difference between somebody who's earning 20 rupees and somebody who's earning 22 rupees. And on the other hand, somebody who's earning 27 rupees is not going to be considered poor, right? So he'll be outside the ambit of the poverty reduction schemes of the government. So to counter this flawed methodology, in 2010, there were these two organizations. The first one is obviously the United Nations Development Program, and the second is the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. They came up with this methodology and they developed this index known as the Multidimensional Poverty Index. So this Multidimensional Poverty Index measures two things. A, so it measures how many poor people are there. which let's say everything, which a lot of other statistics measure. But B, and most importantly, it also measures the intensity of the property. That okay, there are 100 poor people in India, but it also measures how poor these 100 people are. Okay. So there are 10 indicators under this index. So these indicators are nutrition, child mortality, मतलब कितने बच्चे मर रहे हैं within the first 5 years, years of schooling, how many years of schooling someone had, availability of cooking fuel to someone, sanitation, drinking water, availability of electricity, housing and assets, the sort of money these people have, the sort of gold or houses, lands, etc. that these people have. So these are the 10 indicators that are tracked here. And if someone is deprived of at least 3 indicators, then that person is classified as poor. Okay. So they are known as MPI or multidimensional poverty index poor if they lack in, if they are deprived in 3 of these indicators, and the intensity is measured by what percentage are they deprived in these indicators, right? So therefore both incidence of poverty and intensity of poverty is measured. Okay, so the 2009, so they release this index every year. If you look at the 2019 index, okay, Jharkhand, which was one of the worst states in India in terms of MPI. Okay, so the 4 worst states are Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. In these 4 states, Jharkhand has made the most amount of progress. Okay, so infant mortality is, I think, when you die within 1 year, and child mortality is if you die within 5 years. Okay, Ashish, that's the difference here. Okay. Yeah, so okay. So this is one thing that Jharkhand has made the most progress, and secondly, something very interesting that this report pointed out was that there are only 3 countries in the world, including India, where poverty reduction in rural areas is better than poverty reduction in urban areas, which is an indicator of pro-poor development, right? So in every country, basically people are migrating from villages to go to cities to beat poverty, right? In India, it's one of the countries where so there is obviously poverty reduction in rural areas and urban areas both, but poverty reduction in rural areas has outpaced the urban areas, which sort of is an indicator that the government is actually working for development of the poor people. Okay, so this is something that you can take away from this. Now, okay, let's do another very short topic. I think we have time. Yeah. So I think if you followed the news, our Prime Minister also keeps on talking about the idea of ease of doing business. So ease of doing business is not something that happened in 2020. It's basically a report that is published by the World Bank. Okay. Now, what the ease of doing business report is, I hope that you have a rough idea by now. So basically, there are 10 indicators like enforcement of contracts, electricity connection, let's say. And I'm kind of forgetting, but there are 10 indicators in the ease of business doing report, and therefore every country is graded on how good it is performing vis-a-vis those 10 indicators, right? So in every country, 2 cities are selected wherein these indicators are studied. Okay, so until 2019, Delhi and Mumbai were the 2 cities in India for which these indicators are properly studied for. So under the 2020 ease of doing business, now this has expanded to your Kolkata and Bangalore as well. Okay, now 4 cities will be studied here. Okay, so one of the things that so in those 10 parameters, where there was this parameter known as registering of property, which is a nightmare in India. Please ask your parents how much of a trouble it is to register property. Okay, now the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade wants to improve the process of registering property because India has been really performing badly and our rankings are increasing, but they could have become better had we done something about registering of property. Okay, so in 2019 we done a great job. We had reached the 77th position, but in the 2020 ranking we have jumped to 63rd place. Okay, so the 2 important things that you have to take away from here is that we are now ranked 63 as opposed to rank 67, and the second thing is, apart from Bombay and Delhi, Bangalore and Kolkata have also been added. Harsh, can you listen to me? I think there are certain things that I've missed out. So there are a couple of topics. Do we have time to discuss them?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay. Hmm. Okay, so let's discuss this last topic. What? Hello?
No, sir. No, sir. We have time. You can take the time.
Okay. Okay, cool. So this thing, WTO Peace Clause, is something that is covered in economics. It's also somewhat covered in international relations. It's a very important topic. Okay. So recently there was a news that India has invoked the Peace Clause of WTO for exceeding the ceiling on support it can offer to farmers for rice. Okay. Now it's the first time that any country has used this Peace Clause. So now let me tell you what the Peace Clause is. Okay. So under the WTO, there is an agreement on agriculture which says that for a developing country can only support its farmers to the extent of 10% of the total value of the produce. Okay, so the support comes in form of MSP. It comes in form of, let's say, urea subsidies, etc. Right. So for a developing country like India, the permitted percentage is only 10. So this year, India informed the WTO and said, boss, sorry, we have spent 11.46% of the value of production, and therefore we are breaking this de minimis level, and therefore we are in violation of the WTO. However, when the agreement on agriculture was being negotiated under Article 13, there was a concept of due restraint or peace clause, which basically said that there might be certain conditions in developing countries wherein they will have to give more support and they will have to give more MSP, etc., to the farmers. And coronavirus is effect definitely that condition. You can invoke the peace clause in these circumstances. Okay, so generally countries are not supposed to spend more than 10% of the total production value in terms of subsidies, in terms of, let's say, MSPs, etc. But India this year said that especially for rice, we have spent 11.4%. However, the reason that India is giving, so the idea of World Trade Organization is to make sure that the trade in any commodity is free and fair, which means that the states are not supporting their farmers to the extent of detrimental to farmers in other countries, right? So let's say if India is so that's effectively what China is accused of, right? Why are the Chinese goods so cheap everywhere? Because China subsidizes its producers, and therefore, because production cost in China is very low, it floods other countries' market with cheap Chinese products. Okay, so to prevent something like this, under the agreement on agriculture, some terms were discussed vis-a-vis agricultural products. Okay, however, the government of India said that okay, we have spent money, we have so do you guys understand how MSP works? So minimum support price is basically the price that the government of India says that हम इतने में आपसे चावल खरीदेंगे before the harvest season. Now MSP is an open-ended procurement scheme. Okay, so the government, as long as you can get rice to the government will never say no. So the government won't say that, oh, I wanted to collect only 100 kgs of rice. Now you brought me 100 kgs or 105 kgs of rice. I will only pay you for 100 kgs. No, MSP is an open-ended procurement process. As long as you're able to get me rice, I, as government of India, I am obligated to keep buying that from you. Okay. And the reason why government of India does that is basically it wants farmers to keep producing certain things like wheat and rice, because we in the past have suffered from famines. Okay, India is a country which has people dying of hunger. We've had famines. Then right after independence, we were dependent on donation and food grains from other countries because we just didn't have enough to feed our own people, right? So India has had a history of famine, and therefore India says that I don't want people or rice growers and wheat growers to follow the market. And let's say if there is a reduction in the price of wheat and rice in the normal market, then the next year the farmer will not produce that wheat and rice. And what if next year there is a general famine? Then how will I feed the population, right? To make sure that the government of India has enough buffer stock to feed its population in terms of a famine, the government of India comes up with the strategy of MSP. Now, MSP also ensures that the farmers also get reasonable amount of money. They also don't become poor. They also have a sustainable life. And at the same time, government says that we also have enough food to make sure that we can feed people in terms of hunger. So obviously, during the coronavirus crisis, when immense lockdowns were used, government of India had directed Food Corporation of India to go for open market sale of its grains, and therefore a lot of poor people in India were provided free food. We could only do this because government of India has an open-ended MSP policy. So if you produce rice, if you produce wheat, and there's an MSP on it, I, as government of India, will keep buying and I will store this food. Maybe because in some sort of an emergency we would need it, and coronavirus proved that we really need that food, and it's the only reason why people haven't died of hunger in the lockdown, right? Because obviously they don't have money, but at least because government of India has been procuring so much food, people have food to eat. Okay, so government of India told WTO that there are two reasons why we have spent this much money. First of all, we are not buying this to then sell it in the international market for cheap. There is no commercial basis. We are buying this to meet our food security needs. हमारे पास भूखे लोग हैं, हमें उन्हें खाना खिलाना है, हमें फर्क नहीं पड़ता. We are not going to sell this cheap rice and cheap wheat to people in Uruguay. We will not even sell. We will donate it to people in Darbhanga and Bihar who are dying of hunger, right? So therefore, India said that we are therefore violating this condition, and therefore India is saying that now we are going to invoke the peace clause. Okay. So, so when the agreement for the peace clause, when the agreement for agriculture was being discussed, it was decided that the peace clause would remain in effect for a period of 9 years, and it will expire in 2003. Okay. So, however, G33 countries, which were led by India, basically developing countries, said that we will extend this temporary peace clause for 4 years, and this was decided in the Bali Ministerial Conference of the WTO, okay, on grounds of food security. Then in Nairobi, when another conference of the WTO, which is known as the Nairobi Ministerial Conference, took place, the countries decided that, okay, there are certain negotiations and discussions that we want to do about agriculture. There are certain issues vis-a-vis agricultural market, but we will extend this peace clause indefinitely until and unless we are able to come to a conclusion vis-a-vis the global agriculture market, right? So after the Nairobi conference, this peace clause wherein exemption can be claimed for a certain period of time will continue indefinitely. And this is the peace clause that India has used, which has been in the news recently. So I hope that you are able to understand some of these things. I think in the letter on Indian agriculture, I had in the video that I think we'd done with Shweta ma'am, I had talked about the problems that India is facing. So this was one of the problems vis-a-vis the subsidies are not in consonance with the WTO regime. Okay. So now another thing that I want to discuss is PDS. Okay. 1 second. So, 1 second. Yeah. So recently what we saw in the news, so now I've explained to you how MSP works, right? And from MSP, the food is collected and it is stored in godowns, and then it is distributed to the poor people via the public distribution system or the PDS system. So if you I don't know if you've seen them or not, like you guys are fairly privileged, but there are fair price shops in every town and every few kilometers in cities where the poor people who hold ration cards get rice for I think 1 rupee per kg, and they get wheat for like 2 rupees per kg. If you go out and buy, you'll probably get for like 35-40. But the public distribution system is for people who are poor and who are ration card holders. Okay. Now, so Andhra Pradesh was the first state which said that let's go with automation of the public distribution system. And recently, Punjab has been in the news because now it has started an electronic point of sale. Okay. So what electronic point of sale basically is that now I don't have to hold my ration card and go everywhere. If I go somewhere to a fair price shop and I'm registered with Aadhaar, then I can put my fingerprint there and then I can get my ration. Okay. Now this EPOS scheme is working with a larger context. So if you've been following this news, Government of India has been discussing the idea of one nation, one card. Okay, one ration card. So the problem right now is, let's say I am a resident of Himachal Pradesh and I'm a poor person. Okay, I have a ration card here. A ration card is generally given to the family. Okay, so let's say I have a ration card here, but let's say my father has migrated to Delhi for work. Okay, now he continues to be a poor person, but he has to leave his ration card with us so that we can get food for, let's say, 3 people, and he will have to buy expensive food in Delhi because he doesn't have the ration card from Delhi. He only has a ration card from Himachal. And let's say we buy food for 4 people, but we are 3 people only and we're not using that food. So some of that food gets wasted, and then my father is not able to purchase cheap food in Delhi. So the idea behind one nation, one card is that especially if you combine it with, let's say, Aadhaar. Now the idea now is that three of us can continue to stay in Himachal, go get our fingerprints done in that shop, and then we can take ration for three people. And my dad, who's a poor person in Delhi, can claim his own share of ration from the fair price shops in Delhi. Okay, so this is the broader idea of one nation, one ration card that is being talked about. And obviously, when there is an electronic point of scale and when there is integration with technology, it will become much easier for poor people to claim the basic right to eat anywhere and everywhere in this country, right? Because who are the people who have these ration cards? These are your laborers, etc. And these laborers keep on migrating. They're not like us ki 25 saal ek hi shahar mein nikal diya. They'll work here, then probably their road has to be built in Uttar Pradesh. Then all of them will go to Uttar Pradesh, and maybe next season a road has to be built in Gujarat. Then these people will go to Gujarat. Now, obviously, the ration card from Uttar Pradesh or Himachal is not going to work in Gujarat, right? So therefore, the one nation, one ration card is something that is really required, and the government is taking decent steps in that direction. Okay. Let's 1 second. So contract farming, I think we can discuss later. So the last thing that I want to discuss today is coal mining, because coal mining is something that's also been in the news. So recently, Government of India came up with the Mineral Laws Amendment Ordinance 2020. Okay. So what the Government of India does here is that did under this ordinance, there are two important things. Okay. So before what the Government of India did, let me try to explain to you what was the coal policy in India. Okay. So in India, there is a government-owned monopoly company called Coal India Limited. Okay, so only Coal India Limited was permitted to mine gold and mine coal and sell it in the market. Now, the other concept that existed was this concept of captive mining. Okay, so some companies who are experts in, let's say, steel or any other industry that requires coal, only these particular companies could bid for, or sorry, only these companies were given your coal mines to, let's say, mine coal. And because of this captive mining model, so captive mining basically means that if I am mining coal in that particular mine, only I can use that coal in my iron ore industry or some other industry. I can't sell that particular coal in the open market. Okay, now obviously there are multiple problems with that. There are efficiency losses, etc. So therefore, Government of India has come up with the Mineral Laws Ordinance, which now says that captive mining is a thing of past. Any company that is incorporated in India, so any Indian company can go for mining of coal. You do not need to follow this process of captive mining anymore. You can mine coal and you can sell it in the open market. Okay. Now, why this is being done? Because if you look at it paradoxically, India has the fourth largest coal reserves. However, we imported 235 million tons of coal last year, out of which we could have easily provided 135 million tons. So it's effectively like an additional import bill of 1,71,000 crores. Okay, so these are huge, like this is huge amounts of money, and there is no point in importing coal from other countries when we have coal in our own country, right? So the thing is, India, in spite of the fact that it's the third largest producer of coal in the world, it is also the third biggest importer of coal. So it's not making a lot of sense. The policy of captive mining was not making a lot of sense, because there are certain small industries also that require coal, right? Let's say every year I want 3,000 kgs of coal. Now, I'm not going to set up a mine, or I'm not going to go to the government and say that please allow me to run a mining project of my own so that I can just extract this 3,000 kgs of coal every year, right? Obviously, if there is an Adani or a Tata that probably needs like 3 lakh kgs of coal every year, they can go for a mining contract and then they can go for captive mining. But small industries like me do not have the opportunity to do that, and therefore we have to import coal from other countries, which is more expensive. Then transportation costs are added, and then it adds to our import bills, because I'm going to have to pay those companies in dollars, right? And I'm going to provide jobs to miners in those countries. Why don't I provide jobs to coal miners in my own country? Why don't I make those payments in rupees? So therefore, the government has now come up with this ordinance, which has done away with this practice of captive mining. So Harsh, this is basically pretty much that I had to discuss today. We'll probably do a little bit more tomorrow, and then we look at other basic concepts of eco also, if people have a problem with that. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And let's continue this tomorrow with the important concept around the field of economics.
I will teach some banking, etc., what repo rate is, etc., all of these things.
Yeah, that's quite confusing if somebody is not from economics background.
Yeah.
And to understand these term repo rate, reverse repo rate,
Yeah.
bank rate. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish.